All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We'll call this meeting of Labor, Health, and Social Services to order. Thank you for being here. Monday, the 3rd, we have 2 bills before us. I think we only have 2 more committee bills, or 2 more bills that have been signed to our committee, working with the sponsors about which day those will be heard. So Friday, at least Wednesday and Friday, we'll have 1 bill each, if that is what the sponsors want to do. We have 2 members. One is Senator Steinmetz is presenting a bill in Minerals Committee, and Senator Crum is continuing his work from Judiciary on a bill that was carried over. So they were trying to finish that bill up today. But we will be efficient and hear your bills. With that, I guess Senator Driscoll, if you'd like to present your bill, that'd be great. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, committee, thank you very much. I bring you Senate File 155, International Physician Licensing, and ask for your favorable consideration. Folks, I'm going to walk through this fairly quickly. This is a piece of model legislation that's come. It's been passed in 14 other states. It's to address our unbelievable doctor shortage, and it doesn't matter what town you are in Wyoming, there's a doctor shortage. And from this town we're sitting in to the smallest town that has medical needs, we're short of doctors. And what this bill does is allows us to issue temporary licenses for doctors from out of the country that wish to practice in the state of Wyoming. So the first 3 pages of the bill's title and definitions pretty much, so the meat of the bill starts on page 4. I'm going to kind of run through this. I'll answer some of the questions I think that come. So creates 3326-803 state license for healthcare provider sponsored international physicians. And I'm just going to kind of run through this and stand, but board will grant a provisional license. That's one of the key words in the whole thing. It's a provisional license. It is not a permanent license. Practice medicine in the state to any international physician that has that, and this is key, an offer for employment. They can't move into your community and set up office there. They've got to have an offer from someone local that sponsors them. As a physician at any healthcare provider that operates in this state, the board shall require an international physician to complete an application form provided or approved by the board. So this allows them to do an actual application form that they've got to fill out. They have to pass a criminal background investigation, pay all the fees themselves onto page 5 to obtain a provisional license. Line 4, Romanet I, shall not grant a provisional license to practice medicine in the state to enter international physician unless they're eligible to obtain federal immigration status allows them to practice physician in the United States. So they can't just have a green card, they have to have one that says they can practice medicine with it. Little Romanet II on line 10, shall not grant a provisional license to practice medicine state to any international physician unless they pass a passing score on the USMLE as provided in Wyoming Statutes 33-26-802 AIIE, which is what we do with our physicians. Line 15, may revoke a provisional license granted this section if the international physician is not employed by a healthcare provider that operates in this state during the provisional license period. Makes it very clear, if they part company with the local provider, they are not, their provisional license is revoked. Board may suspend or revoke provisional license granted under subsection A of this section pursuant to Wyoming statutes. Licensees may appeal the revoke of their provisional license in accordance with requirements of Wyoming statutes. Page 6, provisional license shall automatically be converted into full license practice medicine in the state after 3 years of active practice. So if they've been in your community for 3 years, active practice, done for it, they will convert to a full license. Under a provisional license, the state licensee is not disciplined under Wyoming statutes 33-26-401 through 33-26-410, and subject to all of the board's rules and regulations under the Medical Practice Act under Wyoming statutes 33-26-101 through 33-26-601. Middle of the page, line 13, provisional license holders shall annually provide proof of compliance familiar to continuing medical education requirements required by the board in a manner set forth by the board's continuing medical education rules and regulations. Nothing in this section shall require the board to license on a provisional or full basis an international physician without evidence of full compliance with the requirements under Wyoming Statute 3326-803A. Page 7, international physicians required to obtain federal work authorization before commencing any work for the sponsoring healthcare provider are eligible to apply for a provisional license prior to receiving federal work authorization, but shall not commence work under the provisional license without the required work authorization. So if someone's coming from another country, they can actually go ahead and apply for it and then get the federal deal, but they can't practice till they have it. Line 9, international physicians who become licensed under subsection of this section shall not need to maintain employment with the original sponsoring healthcare provider at the conclusion of the provisional licensing period, which is 3 years, basically, and grant them normal status. Go on section 2, it's more definitions once again, and it just adds the provisional into it. And that goes through all the way to basically to the end of the bill. And last section of the bill, State Board of Medicine shall promulgate all the rules necessary to implement this act. Effective July 1, 25, and section 3 or 4, effective immediately on completion of the acts necessary for a bill to become law, Article 4, Section 8 of the Constitution. That's the bill, folks. I think all of us, there's not hardly a person in the state that doesn't recognize the shortage of doctors we have. To bring doctors in that want to come that are not necessarily U.S. citizens, I applaud it. I would tell you, in my community, I would love just to have a physician, be it a U.S. physician or one from somewhere else. We kind of operate under PAs. They take wonderful care of us, but physicians fill a different niche. I think this bill's a good bill for Wyoming and a good step forward, and it's time that we fulfill as much as we can of our healthcare requirements. A couple points on it. We do have 263,000 immigrants who hold international healthcare degrees that are unemployed right now. We might pick a percentage up. I would represent to you, if we pick up one physician in the state of Wyoming by passing this bill, we've done a good thing for the state. Thank you, and I'd stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Senator Driscoll? Senator Hutchings? Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, on page 5, line 15 and following, that 3 little I, where they can revoke, you're essentially turning the international physician into an indentured servant for the employer. Will that withstand a 13th Amendment challenge?
Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, I'm unable to answer that. I'm not positive, but I assume it will. I'm guessing, but I can find the answer to you and bring it back on committee of the whole or otherwise. But I think these type situations are pretty common in the medical profession. I'm guessing there's testimony going to come behind me that can clear this up for you, Senator Scott. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions, Senator Scott?
Not at this time.
Senator Hutchings?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Driscoll, thank you for that wonderful explanation. On page 3, line 5, we talk about this particular individual being in good standing with the medical license and regulatory institutions in their country. How do we keep track of that?
Senator Driscoll.
I would, Mr. Chairman, Senator, my belief is if I was looking at it, it would be under the application process for them to apply proof. We've allowed the agency bringing them in to require whatever they want. They actually have an application, and I would expect that they would say in it, provide proof to us that you're in good standing where you came from.
Thank you. Further questions?
I'll let him
Senator
go.
Hutchings?
I'll let him go and I'll
Oh.
rephrase mine. Thank you.
So I guess I have a couple of questions, and these are rhetorical. One is on the licensing board. Some of these folks, and we've seen this, breakdowns in countries, very educated people leave those countries, and there is no structure left. think about Afghanistan, think about some of those places. There is no structure left in those, in those communities. So that's one, as far as, good standing. There is nothing to be in good standing with potentially. Second would be the background checks, same thing. If the government is broken down in those countries, there is no way to do a background. What I guess I'm trying to get to is, if these are requirements of the bill, then if those circumstances come up, the board will have no ability to approve someone that has that gap in their potential background. So those are two things that I would just point out. I'm not saying they're detrimental, but I just think they have to be addressed. And then to Senator Scott's provisional license on page 5, lines 15 through 19, I think that actually also ties into page 7, G, which is, you don't have to stay with the same employer, but what kind of a gap is acceptable? And I don't know if we have that addressed in the bill as far as what a gap, a month or 2 months or 3 months before they lose that provisional. And then page 6, the Board of Medicine will talk about this, but licenses, and at least in my view and my license, it's an annual license. And so while you may get a provisional license, it still requires annual updating. And to be automatically converted, I think they would be eligible for a full license to practice, not automatically converted probably. So I just throw those couple of things out there. There may be just technicalities, but I think they're maybe something to be addressed by other folks that may come forward. Anything else from the committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Scott.
Couple of things. One, on page 7, lines 12 and 13, where they don't have to maintain continuing employment at the conclusion of the provisional licensure period. That says that for the first 3 years they do. I think you've got a 13th Amendment problem. We'll see. Mr. Chairman, my other question is, they're talking about 5 years and 7 years. The case where I was aware, and this was a number of years ago, lady was trained as a medical doctor in, I think it was Great Britain, but another English-speaking country. Husband came to the United States with a temporary job for going to be 2 or 3 years, limited time sort of thing. And we wanted to get her license, and there was just overwhelming opposition from the medical community. We couldn't get it done under the laws at that point. Just terrible waste of a talent that we needed. What would you think if we took the 5 years to 2 years or something like that?
So Senator Driscoll, just so you know, this is on page 3, lines 5 through 9, and there's 7 years below that, 11 through 16, and then there's multiple places where there are very distinct timelines requirements. So anyway, any comments to that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, assuming I can get the bill passed, I'm open for as short a timeline as we can do. Back to your other end of it, I want doctors, and I'm not overly concerned, and it goes somewhat back to the chairman's questions, background checks otherwise. Doctors in Wyoming get the acid test because you start serving patients instantly, and if you're not a good doctor, they go to another town or another place, and if you're a good one, you have a great following. We just had one, came out of the military into my community, and we built an unbelievable practice, and then a hospital out of state poached him from us because he had gathered up a substantial part of our local community and took it into another healthcare system. So it's a competitive world they're in, but for me, it's all about healthcare for my constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Driscoll, this all sounds nice and good, but it seems to me that it's kind of a shame that we're having to go to other countries to get medical professionals to come and work in our state. One of the questions that comes to mind is, what if this person does decide to come in, or they get in and they're working just fine and something happens? How do we keep track of these people to make sure that they don't bounce around from, hey, I get in Wyoming and now I'm gonna go to Colorado or another state, and when we start losing these people? Have you guys thought about that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hutchins, yeah, we have. You know, it's like I said, they're a competitive deal, and be it through WWAMI or our other means, we spend a lot of money and a lot of time recruiting doctors, and they're expensive, and we pray they stay in the state. Hopefully, we provide an environment that's good enough, but back to our earlier deals about turning them into indentured servants, is we really can't force them. We've just got to provide an environment that's good enough that they want to stay. And hopefully, you know, we're the greatest state in the nation. Hopefully we tell them we've got the best place, probably not the best money. So, you know, I don't have an answer to you, and we cry every time we lose a doctor, because for all of us, once you've got used to going to somebody, when they leave, you're in tears because you've built a relationship.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Further questions? All right. Let's take some other testimony. I see the Board of Medicine here, since they are integral to the implementation.
Not to be rude, I've got a meeting across the hallway,
That's
so I'm
fine.
off.
If we need something from you, we'll send the ambulance.
You can send me across.
Yep. Thank you. Mr. Bonenblust, welcome. Is there any other state agencies here that want to testify? I didn't see any need for anybody else, but I just want to make sure. Go ahead, Mr. Bonenblust.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kevin Bonenblust, Executive Director of the Board of Medicine. And I come to you, I say this very carefully. This is not a bad bill. It's not, and of course, our board doesn't take a position for or against. But I think there's a couple of cliches that have come up that I think apply in this case. One is, I think this is a solution in search of a problem. The last 2 years, we've licensed over 1,200 docs per year. We've only had 1,400 living in the state, though. We have almost 7,000 licensed docs, and we're frozen at 1,400 living in the state. So I don't know that this is going to be the panacea that everybody hopes it would be, but we're not getting tons of requests from hospitals to help them get foreign physicians licensed. We're just not. If we were, we would certainly be going after it. My suggestion, though, is that this is maybe not quite ready for prime time. Another one of my favorite legislative cliches. And there are a number of issues in here that I think I'd like to get figured out before we run a bill. First one is, for instance, international criminal background check. I have got no idea how we will do that. It's pulling teeth to get the FBI to let a licensing board just query in the US. And so to be able to somehow query, I don't know where we go, Interpol, I've got no idea. How do we verify a satisfactory work experience in a foreign country? I don't know how to verify that. Are we going to be placed in charge of determining whether their immigration status meets or not? I don't know. We don't do that right now. There's, you know, the point is that this license will stay in place as long as someone is employed by an institution or you know, healthcare provider. But how do we know when they leave that? We have no way to force the provider, or the employer to tell us, because they're not subject to our licensure. So this person could walk off the job and we would never know the difference. They'd still have that provisional license. Employer doesn't care, they're off in the weeds. We don't have a way to track that. We don't have a way to force the employers to tell us anything. And then coming back to Senator Scott's question about the 13th Amendment, I actually wrote in my notes on this, I wrote the word servitude, question mark. And I think really what it amounts to is maybe the biggest, meanest non-compete I've ever seen. Because this physician comes in, is sponsored to work at ABC Hospital, gets crossways with the administrator at ABC Hospital, and life becomes miserable. Well, you're gonna stay here and keep working, or you're gonna get your ticket pulled. Now, what's your choice? And so, and it's for the entire state of Wyoming. They couldn't go from the northeast corner of the state to the southwest. So that's worrisome. All that is to say that I would really love a chance to actually work on a bill like this over the next few months and bring it back in the next session. I think we can make it work for Wyoming and do what the sponsors want to do, but also make it so that we can actually implement it when we have to do it. That said, I've got a few real simple suggestions for corrections, which would be, of course, in the form of an amendment. On page 2, line 12, before the words healthcare provider, I would put in this article, because we want to keep it narrowed down to just this section 801 through 803. We don't want to mess around with the rest of the Practice Act. Same on page 4, line 7. Insert in this article. On page 3, line 5.
Go ahead with the next.
Okay, page 3, line 5. It's kind of an incomplete thought. I think it should say has been licensed. Insert the word licensed in good standing with the Medical Licensing Board. Just to make it clear, you actually have to have a license with them. Page 6, line 7.
What was it again, page 6?
Yes, page 6, line 7. I think we have a missing word. I think at the end of the line, we want to put the word ben, B-E-E-N. So if the licensee has not been disciplined. I think that's just a scrivener's error. Page 6, line 13. Excuse me. This really complicates our process for continuing medical education. So what I would suggest is striking on line 13 the word annually and inserting instead comply with the, then strike all of line 14. And on line 15, strike required by, and line 16, the board in the manner. So that basically reads as provisional license holders shall comply with the continuing medical education requirements as set forth by the board's continuing medical education rules and regulations. And that way they're in the same boat everyone else is. And then last, the comment on line 4 of page 6, I would feel a lot better, Mr. Chairman, if that word automatically would be changed to something like shall be eligible to apply to convert. Because automatic granting of a license is, there is no such thing in our world. You know, there's always a questions to be answered. So I would suggest that maybe be changed from automatically to something.
This is page 4, page 6, line 4.
Page 6, pardon me, line 4. I apologize.
It's provisional licensure C, Romanet C. Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, to recap, this is a great idea, although I don't know that it's going to bring us a whole lot of fruit, but we can do it. What I would respectfully ask is that maybe we have a chance to actually craft a bill for Wyoming and not take one off the shelf when we may do things differently in Wyoming. We have certainly more difficulties recruiting physicians and things like that and retaining them. Maybe we can actually craft this to be a Wyoming bill, and that's what I would hope the committee would ask us to do. And with that, I'll try to answer any questions with what voice I have
Mr.
left.
Bonenblest? Questions, Mr. Bonenblest? No questions, I guess. Thank you, Kevin.
All right, you
Appreciate
let
it.
me off easy, thank you.
All right. Hospital Association, Medical Society, who else wants to testify? Testify? If nobody's moving, we're going to close the public testimony. Okay. Do you want someone to go online first? Oh, you go ahead. Go ahead. Mr. Bully, you go ahead, and then we'll go online. I see two people, Keith Waddell and Jonathan Wolfson. So go ahead, Mr. Bully.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, Eric Bully with the Wyoming Hospital Association. And I think this is an interesting concept, and obviously it's addressing a specific need in our state, which is more providers. I queried my membership just to kind of find out the interest in this and what's happening right now, and then maybe some of the hurdles or the barriers that we might face. There is interest in using internationally trained physicians, and we actually have some working right here at CRMC that went through the process of getting the J-1 visa and employing those providers. Some of my facilities around the state are hesitant for a number of different reasons, and one of them is they address that the J-1 visa is a huge barrier and it takes time. I think it takes almost 18 months right now to get an internationally trained provider through the process and get them to work here. And I know we're talking about 263 potential healthcare workers in the country right now that are international and don't have that ability. But we're also talking about bringing in additional internationally trained providers. I don't know if there's much we can do about the J1 side of things, but it is a barrier. Some of them are concerned about malpractice, especially if we don't have adequate background checks, as Mr. Bonenblust had talked to us about. And some of our malpractice insurance carriers are even hesitant, even if they go through that vetting process, just because of some of the potential pitfalls and problems in generating or getting that background information. And then one thing that I don't think we've talked about, and I'm not really sure, but I did see Blue Cross Blue Shield walk in, is I don't really know if we're gonna run into some barriers with credentialing if we don't do this properly and getting those providers enrolled in our insurance market. And so those are our main thoughts. I don't know how widely used this would be, and I agree with Senator Driscoll that there are some our state is pretty much designated by CMS and others as a physician shortage area, or most of our areas are. So bringing someone in makes sense. I just think we need to do it in the right way. And I would also be supportive of Mr. Bonenblust's idea of working on this in the interim to make sure that we address all these and come back with a bill that's ready for Wyoming. With that, I'd answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Boley? Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, on page 5, line 6, on the immigration status, it says unless they're eligible to obtain a federal immigration status. As I would read that, I think it might be possible to license somebody who is eligible but is on some kind of a waiting list to obtain it. That may solve some of your problem there, if the lawyers can be creative with it. Mr. Chairman, I think the language here is useful.
Okay, thank you. Senator Scott?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Senator Scott,
Boley.
I think we identified something that I'm not sure how we would check it, but it says that they are eligible to obtain federal immigration status that allows them to practice as a physician in the United States. I'm not well versed enough to know whether or not that's the type of immigration status that's issued or allowed.
We'll find out.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? Thank you, Mr. Boley. We'll go online now, I think. Go ahead. Please introduce yourself and provide your testimony.
Hi there, my name is Jonathan Wolfson. Can you all hear me? Mr.
Yes,
Chairman?
go ahead, please.
Excellent. My name is Jonathan Wolfson. I'm the Chief Legal Officer and Policy Director at Cicero Action, and we're a nonprofit that advocates for public policy around the country. We've had the opportunity to work on international physician licensing bills in a number of states around the country, helping most of the 10 states that have laws on the books put those laws on the books, and the dozen states that have presented bills this legislative session this year do it. As the sponsor has already articulated, Wyoming has a physician shortage, and I don't need to go into all of the data that demonstrate the shortage. And the solution of looking to internationally licensed doctors, some of whom are at or near the top of their field, as a potential pool of providers who can provide for a state is something that states like Idaho and Colorado have both already done, and is something that other states that surround your area in Wyoming are also considering right now. And I think that the key thing to remember is in this bill, the way that it is written, the only change to your current law for these internationally licensed doctors is that they do not have to take a residency slot and spend 3 or more years doing residency in order to practice in the state of Wyoming. Otherwise, the medical board is given the discretion to review their information. I'm happy to address some of the concerns that were raised earlier. I think the key things to remember is that most immigration, Senator Scott, I think the key thing to remember is most of the immigration laws in our country that are employment-based do require the worker to be linked to that employer. And so those have never lost 13th Amendment challenges on the federal side previously. And so we don't have any expectation that that would create problems in this provisional licensing setup here. I think that the other question Senator Hutchings asked, and I think is a really important one, is how do you make sure that doctors who go through this program stay in the state of Wyoming? And I think one of the concerns that lots of states have is that you have students who go to medical school in your state, they might do residency in your state, and then a large number of them end up leaving. And so the state is providing resources to train those people who then leave the state, some of whom were themselves trained outside the United States originally, and then they did residency in Wyoming, and then they might end up in Colorado or other states. And one of the nice things about this bill is this is not the type of license that is as easily transferable to other states. And the reason it's not as easily transferable is that effectively you are writing an exception into your statutes that allows those doctors to practice without fulfilling that residency requirement, which all the compacts require them to have done. So it does make it harder for those doctors to leave the state of Wyoming with the license that they would obtain under a law such as the one in front of us. So I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all may have about this legislation, about what other states around the country have been doing. I think that this is an important pathway that is part of, and I absolutely agree with the Hospital Association and with the medical board. This is not a panacea. It's not intended to be a panacea, but it is a way to address the physician shortage and to provide you additional doctors in the state. I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all have about this bill or what anyone else in the country is doing. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you very much. Questions? So my query is, you mentioned, I think earlier was 13 states have adopted something similar to this. You mentioned Idaho and Colorado. What's the net uptake from those states? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, so far, Idaho has licensed, I believe, 5 doctors so far. Tennessee has licensed 6 doctors so far. And those laws have only been effective this calendar year.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Further questions? All right. Who else would like to testify? Do we have someone else on this bill? Crook County? Yep. Heath? Crook County Medical Services District?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Wolfson. Go ahead, introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to address this committee. My name is Heath Waddell, and I'm the only physician in Crook County, Wyoming. I specialize in rural and remote medicine. My family has been in Wyoming for 6 generations, and after graduating East High School in Cheyenne and doing college in Billings, I attended the Flinders University of South Australia. I did 2.5 years of residency there with a concentration in ICU, and then returned to the U.S. where I did residency in family medicine in Rapid City, South Dakota. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to educate you from my experiences, as I am a white, as well as a foreign medical school graduate, and have kind of experienced this on the other side of things. When I saw this bill, I thought it was important to maybe describe some of the factors that have happened in the Australian system. In Australia, they have quite a foreign medical graduate program, and I would say I came into contact with at least people from 23 different countries while I worked there. These were all physicians. Some were amazing, and there were some that certainly moved into small communities and really struggled with the Australian system. But Australia is very similar to Wyoming in the fact that 80% of the population lives on the coast. The rest of it is rural and remote, and supplying small towns with doctors is a big problem. Occasionally, these doctors assimilate. They come from different places and do really well. I recently had conversations with 2 physicians, one from the U.S., one from Australia and one from the U.K. A colleague of mine that I trained with in Australia recently came to Tennessee under a similar program, although she had to repeat her residency. And so she basically did 4 years of medical school, did 6 years of training, was a attending or consultant in Australia, and then came to the U.S. and had to repeat residency as actually a very senior clinician. The next person, this physician's name is Lorna. She attended King's College in London, did anesthesia in Australia, was a attending and consultant, and recently has taken a position at Vanderbilt. In their legislation, they do not require a USMLE. There's no ECFMG. She actually had a personal interview with the Board of Medicine, and she actually felt that this was much more conducive to letting them know her story and check her credentials. Now, yes, she's been in this long process, but openly admitted that if she had to resit a USMLE, that she probably would not have gone down this pathway. And I think what Tennessee looked at is her academic standing was quite good. She had worked in big hospitals and was willing to fill a need that they had. In her words, people are using common sense to fill positions in the US and get doctors here. She has a colleague that's a pediatric surgeon that recently did the same. One of her concerns is that if we develop tick box type credentialing, that people get through and we really don't have great backgrounds and we don't know that we're getting the best physicians. If we compare this to the Arizona system, Arizona accepts IMGs from only 10 countries, most likely because their training programs are quite robust. And so when I talk about things like the ECFMD, this is actually a credentialing agency, educational committee for foreign medical graduates. They also issue English proficiency exams. Australia uses them. So that is one factor that some places use. And then the USMLE is actually an entry test into medicine for medical students. If you can imagine this anesthesiologist who is 10 years into her career, having to go back and take an entry-level test, it could be quite taxing and actually maybe a turnoff. As far as I know, and Mr. Chairman, maybe going back to our days of biology, I don't know the Krebs cycle. That stuff I would have to completely relearn if I was coming back into the US. But in saying that, had I finished my training in Australia, this would have been a great way for me to come back home and actually work in Wyoming instead of having to repeat a residency. So just some other things to consider is that many physicians working in developing countries, kind of as has been alluded to, there may not be a robust medical school or background checks that are available. They may have worked in really low resource areas and have difficulty assimilating into the US or even the US healthcare system. Just some other thoughts is physician oversight or mentorship is always useful. When I came back, the practice of medicine is very similar, but there's a lot of nuances in the US that make it very complicated, which I think you need good mentorship. I don't know that I'd be comfortable putting somebody in Sundance, Wyoming, and who's never practiced there without some sort of oversight or at least mentorship. Certainly you have to consider if we hired a geneticist, say in Gillette, Wyoming, who's going to mentor a geneticist? There isn't another one in the state. Will we get business from that? Absolutely. Would it be good for our communities? Absolutely. So I'm just here to say that overall, this is a progressive bill that will likely supply Wyoming with some physician needs. There are some intricacies that should be considered and possibly amended. Many of the finite complexities could be addressed at the level of the Board of Medicine, but I'd really like to thank the committee and Mr. Chairman for your time and giving me the privilege of speaking with you today.
Thank you, Dr. Waddell. Any questions for the doctor? Thank you. Senator Hutchings, you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if you can indulge me. Mr. Waddell, or Dr. Waddell, did you have a favorite footy team in Australia?
I did not get into the footy, but I love cricket.
Okay, thank you, sir.
He lost his accent too, or never
Yeah.
ever picked one up, maybe. But thank you, Doctor. Thanks for your service in rural Wyoming. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right. Who else would like to testify to this bill? Come on up, please. Anyone else? Let's fill the chairs up. We're going to be short on time. Go ahead, Mr. Lindholm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Tyler Lindholm. I'm the State Director for Americans for Prosperity in the state of Wyoming. We're on and in favor of this legislation. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, when I say that international medical graduates play a critical role in addressing physician shortages, I mean that because I am from Sundance, Wyoming, and that was my doctor up on the video. So we do think that there is a very critical role. And this is an opportunity for the state of Wyoming that we believe could possibly bring in more doctors. Now, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we don't know, right? This is one of those opportunities. We've passed multiple pieces of legislation over the years that were new and innovative in ways that we decided to try. And so, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this would be an opportunity for our Board of Medicine to set rules that fits the state of Wyoming and fits the needs, which they have the authority to do so under this legislation. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I will stand for questions.
Questions for Mr. Lindholm? Questions? Senator Hutchings?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, former Representative Lindholm. My question is, we had heard testimony that the bill could use some tweaks. Would you be willing to work with the director on maybe making this better and something that we can work on in the interim,
Mr. Lindholm?
if we don't send it through? Thank you.
Mr. Lindholm?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and to Senator Hutchings' questions, absolutely. I mean, our preference is we see it move forward, and I'd be happy to work on those amendments and assist the director in whatever he needs to be able to gather that information while it goes through the process, but it'd be up to the committee, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further questions? So my question is, I think Dr. Waddell spoke to this, and this is very rigid in these requirements, at least by my view. There is no, get out of free jail card isn't the right word, but there is no, the board, giving the board some discretion to interview somebody to review in a holistic way qualifications in it. It seems to me that would be at least an addition that I would be interested in. Do you, in other states that have done this, and I could have asked Mr. Wolfson what other states have done, but it seems like when he referred to Tennessee, they may have done something like that. You have any comment on that, Mr. Lindholm?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the members of the committee, and to your question. I think Dr. Waddell brought up a really good point about an entry-level test being a requirement. That might be deemed as well above my, I'm well over my skis speaking to it, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, but I do believe that a regulatory authority, the Board of Medicine, would probably be able to determine whether or not a candidate is duly qualified, probably better than a prep test. So with that, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, our belief, if you wanted to pare down the legislation so that it was more reliant on the Board of Medicine versus the requirements and legislation, we would be supportive of that.
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. Seeing none, Mr. Doherty.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Jeff Doherty, today representing Cicero Action. Mr. Chairman, I've just got 2 quick points for the body. One, as you know, Mr. Wolfenson is with Cicero Action as well. We've had our legal folks review the comments that the first speaker, the edits the first speaker suggested. Very comfortable with all those. And to Senator Hutchings' point, we too would also be willing to collaborate to provide amendments to this bill. And the last point that I've got for you, Mr. Chairman, is that I wanted to point out that the sponsor of the physician is actually taking on a fair amount of liability. And so I think they're going to take that responsibility seriously. And I think that will help to provide an incentive to not allow bad doctors into the system, Mr. Chairman. With that, I'd conclude my comments.
Thank you very much. Questions for Mr. Doherty? Seeing none, thank you very much. Further public comment? Further public comment? No one else online? No one else online. All right, committee, you have a bill before you.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to proceed with this bill. I'm asking advice from the chairman. I think we can tweak it quite a bit right here and right now if the chairman is willing. How do you feel about that?
I think we can work the bill. So there's a motion on the bill.
Mr.
Pretty
Chairman,
sure that was a motion on the bill.
yep, it was a conditional motion.
It was a conditional motion.
Now it's a motion.
So we'll take a few minutes and work through the bill.
Mr. Chairman,
All right, Senator Scott.
I move all the amendments that were proposed by the Board of Medicine.
Okay, so for this, Mr. Bonambless, do you have all those in a form that we can turn in, or you can just walk through very quickly and then turn that, or have that, provide that to our staff? Yes. Okay, so I'm just going to highlight them. I think it was page 2, line 12 in this article. Again, on page 4, line 7 in this article. And then on page 6, line 4, there was some language striking automatically and making it eligibility for full licensure. And then on line, I'm just kind of trying to highlight the ones that I recall. Page 6, line 13, it's annually, there was a kind of a striking and a rewriting of this to comply with the continuing medical education requirements set forth by the board. So, I'm just, and if I'm missing something, my apologies. Those are the 4 that I have. Mr. Bonambless, is there anything I'm missing?
Page 4, line 17, when you said 4, original, not permanent license, something to that effect.
I don't recall anything there, but Mr. Bonambless, did you have something on page 4, line 17, or in that area?
Page 4, line 17.
Line 7, I had something,
Line 7, pardon me. Page 4, line 7, insert in this article.
right? And then nothing on line 17 or through 23?
No.
Thank you.
Somebody else, okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
I believe I found the amendment you're referring to. I believe it's actually on page 6, around line 4. We didn't iron out exactly what the language would be, but it would be something to the effect of shall be eligible to apply to convert.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that was also a suggestion from Mr.
Correct.
Bonambless.
And then in that same paragraph, end of line 7, insert the word ben, B-E-N,
At the end of line 7, right?
end of line 7, yes.
Yep. All right, perfect. So that's 5. Discussion on those?
Question?
Question on those proposed amendments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? There are no more. There's no more.
Okay.
There's no more votes. We're out of votes.
Something on page 4, line 17, maybe it's Senator Scott doing that?
Page
So that,
4.
those amendments are adopted. We'll get Mr. Bonambless to provide you the,
Okay. Mr.
Senator
Chairman,
Scott.
I've got a series more on page 2. This is, page 4, excuse me, the criminal background issue. Page 4, line 23, after investigation, insert the word if practically available, because the argument was that they might not be practically available.
okay?
So I move that.
Discussion on the amendment. Discussion, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Amendment is adopted. Did you get that?
Could you repeat the amendment, please?
So it's page 4, line 23, after investigation, comma, if practicably available. Something, comma, thank you. Senator Scott.
Chairman, on page 5, delete on line 15, delete, revoke, insert the word suspend. So change revoke to suspend, and then add a new sentence. If the international physician loses employment with the healthcare provider, the license shall be suspended until the international physician obtains employment with another Wyoming healthcare provider. And then add another sentence, if the international physician cannot obtain acquired employment within 1 year, the license shall be revoked. So we give them a year to find a different employer. And I think they would find it either much quickly or not at all, but give me a year.
Do you have most of that? We'll get some final language from Senator Scott. He'll look at it with you. but
Just to clarify, where's the language inserted?
It goes on the page 5, line 18, after period.
Period, except,
Two new sentences. Okay.
except the
Oh.
line 15, change revoke to suspended. Delete.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
It's brought to my
Mr.
attention
Bonamblus, since you're the resident expert on your statutes, go ahead.
It's a dangerous place to be. There was one other suggested amendment we had on page 3.
Oh, this is a new amendment?
This is part of that one that was
Okay,
previously.
well, let's get rid of this and then we'll come to you. Discussion on this amendment, Senator Scott.
I'm just a little concerned, Senator Scott, about the 1 year. 6 months seems like it's pretty good.
Mr. Chairman, if 6 months, I think get the job done too.
All right, friendly
Thank you,
amendment
sir.
to the amendment, 6 months.
Thank you, sir.
Discussion, seeing
I'm
none, all those in
not
favor
just
say
hanging out
aye.
in the country.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Amendment is adopted.
I'm
Mr.
aye.
Bonamblus, you had another,
Yes,
Something I
Mr.
missed.
Chairman, it was pointed out to me that there was one amendment I suggested that may have been inadvertently left out. Page 3, line 5, between the word "been" and "in," insert "licensed." So it reads,
There you
"has been
go.
licensed in good standing with a medical licensing or regulatory institution."
okay. Discussion on that? Motion,
Got it?
thank you, Mr. Bonamblus. Motion, discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no.
Mr. Chairman,
Adopted. Mr. Senator Scott.
further amendment that was in concert with the previous one.
7.
That was adopted on page 7. International physicians who become licensed subjects need not maintain employment. The original sponsoring healthcare provider put a period in, and we don't need that at the conclusion of the professional licensing period, given the previous amendment.
So we're striking on line 12, page 7. From,
At the conclusion of the provisional, and then strike licensing period.
you get that? Mm-hmm. All right. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Adopted. Further amendments to the bill. Senator Driscoll's not going to know what happened.
But he'll be
What he
happy.
gets for leaving.
He'll be happy.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Scott.
the 5-year and the 7-year really are kind of long.
I
Just
agree, but
Should we go to 3 years or 3 years?
I guess well, I'll leave that to you to make a motion. I guess I have to read them really closely to try
Yeah,
to
me
figure
too.
out
Let me see.
what the starting point is for both of them, all of them.
Yeah.
So I'll leave that to other folks to maybe do, and I don't know that I'm willing to take it on at this time personally, but I think it's worthy of more.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that on page 3, line 7, page 3, line 15, and page 3, line 20, we change the existing number of years there, in all cases, to 3 years.
Okay, so we're striking 5, 7, and 5 and inserting 3. Discussion on the amendment.
It just reduces the severity of that.
I'm gonna be a no on that one.
All right, further discussion, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
All right, so we do not have a majority on that one
Okay.
for that, but I think Senator Scott, I think you're onto something, I just
Oh,
don't know.
yeah.
I just don't know that the starting point is the same on all of them,
Yeah.
that's my, I don't know if they're staggered or tiered in some
Good
way.
job.
All right,
Question to that.
further discussion on the bill, further discussion on the bill, see now, would you call, roll call on Senate File 155, and just so the body, so those attending know, in this committee, we're always gonna have, even though there's only 3 of us, it's still gonna take a majority of the committee to pass the bill forward, not 2 out of the 3 that are sitting here. So it'll take all of us to vote for this bill to advance it, so. Please, Mr. Caldwell.
This is a roll call vote for Senate File 155 as amended. Senator Crum,
Excuse.
Senator Hutchings,
Aye.
Senator Scott,
Aye.
Senator Steinmetz,
Excused?
Chairman Barlow.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that is 3 aye and 2 excused.
All right, thank you very much. So those that are advocating for this bill probably get with Senator Driscoll, outline what we did with the amendments, and then any other questions that came up, including the 575 that Senator Scott was interested in. So we go there. Thank you very much. All right, we have an next bill up. This is, we're pleased to have Senator Boner. And this is a lot of bill, but it's a compact, so we know there's lots of language other people have looked at. So, Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is bring you a physical therapy licensure compact bill. This is a constituent request I got from one of the members of my community concerned about the challenges they have.
Could you pull that microphone just a little closer? Thank you.
Is that better, Mr. Chairman? The challenges they have in finding physical therapists to practice in small towns in Wyoming, I'm sure big ones too, Mr. Chairman. So this was one way to ease the administrative burden and provide more options for those working in this space. So a little bit about the compact, a little bit how it works. And this will basically allow our Wyoming physical therapists to take advantage of a very large compact, has 38 member states. 4 are considering currently, including Wyoming, and then there are 4 non-member states. And basically what it does is allows your license that you get in Wyoming to be transported to these states with a very minimal process and very minimal fee. So it allows for folks to do the work if they're properly licensed in one of the compact states and without undue delay if they move or even provide telehealth. And believe it or not, that's a thing for physical therapy. So, Mr. Chairman, you do have a letter from the president of the board of physical therapists. So far, they haven't really taken a position, but it seems like it's been fairly positive support, 37 signatures in support, and only 4 days of asking for them. And so, overall, pretty strong support, I'd say, even though if they haven't taken a position. Most of the concerns revolve around more competition, especially with telehealth. The president of the association said that he has reached out to other states, some of the 38 other states, and they said that has been rather minimal. Like I said, I think physical therapy is one of those practices where you have to be hands-on. I think the vast majority of consumers understand that. So, Mr. Chairman, as you stated, this is a compact bill. It's one of those things where you take it or leave it, I guess you could say. So just aware of that. Pages 1 through 49 are the compact itself. Then the remainder of the bill up until I think it's about page 60 is conforming amendments. We do have a July 1st, 2025 effective date, Mr. Chairman. So to be clear, we're still licensing physical therapists in Wyoming. If there is some sort of telehealth situation and somebody from another state is practicing in Wyoming, we have direct jurisdiction there as well. So I could go into detail, Mr. Chairman, as much detail as you'd like. The actual compact is divided into 12 sections, and we could go into that, but I think I described how it would work. And so I can pause for questions there at the overview, and we can move forward if you like, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Boner. Questions for Senator Boner? Questions for Senator Boner? So I have 2 questions. One is, how many states are in it now, and is it active? So answer that one, then I'll have a second one. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So 38 states currently. The trigger was 10, and so they met that some time ago. So yes, it is active.
Okay, thank you. And I know it's in here. Wyoming won't get a position on the commission, probably, will it? By joining. Go ahead.
Every state gets 1 member, Mr. Chairman. So.
Thank you. It's unique to this one then. Many of them, you don't get a member after you're part of the original. All right, questions for Mr. Boner? Senator Boner, questions?
Just one. What's the biggest
Senator
negative
Hutchins.
to, thank you, Senator, Chairman Barlow, what's the biggest negative to these compacts? We seem to be getting a lot of them lately, and I've always been a ooh on them, but what's the biggest negative, Senator Boner?
If you want to point out that there's anything negative on something you're proposing, you're welcome to.
Yes, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman,
I mean-
I'll do my best to be fair. It's,
Yeah.
the concern in for physical therapists is that there's going to be more competition, especially, like I said, it allows for telehealth. But in reaching out to states that already have, are a part of this compact, they've realized that that's actually been a very minor very minor thing, I guess you could say. It just hasn't materialized.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Senator Scott.
This would make it easier, would it not, for physical therapists who have to move to another state for family reasons or something like that from Wyoming to get licensed in one of those other compact states, would it not?
Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I suppose it would if they're moving for other reasons, then they would be as, the process, at least I haven't gone through it myself, obviously, it's about 10 minutes on the website, and you pay anywhere from $100 to $200 fee, and you're licensed in that state.
Okay, thank you, Senator Scott. Further questions for Senator Boner? Further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Senator. You don't have to go away, maybe. Anybody else want to testify to this bill?
Quick one, Senator,
Yes,
Chairman.
Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, sir. Do you know why Idaho hasn't jumped in yet?
So there's 38 states that have.
Idaho
Any
is-
discussion on some of the states that haven't?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know why Idaho has not done it yet. They're our only neighboring state, which is not. Most of the other states that have not jumped in are fairly large, so California, New York, Florida, they probably don't necessarily, they have enough folks in the state that this isn't quite as relevant as a smaller state like Wyoming. But I haven't heard any particular feedback as to Idaho as to why they're the only neighboring state that has not done this.
Thank you. Further? All right. Anyone else want to testify to this bill? Please come forward. I've got Mr. Schrock online. Is he online? No, okay. All right, well, go ahead and introduce yourself and provide your testimony. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. I'm a little short. Good afternoon, Chairman Barlow and committee. I'm Chelsea Cortez, so I'm the administrator for the PT board. Senator Boner did a great job explaining what is entailed in the PT compact, but if you have any questions for the board, I'm happy to try and answer them.
Ms. Cortez, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Questions for the board? I have a question. How many other boards are you responsible for in your directorship?
6 total.
And do some of those
6 and
other
a
boards?
half.
6.5, okay. I don't know what a half board
I
is,
don't
but.
either.
Do any of those other boards have compacts within them? Ms.
Mr.
Cortez?
Chairman, none of my others do. There are other compacts in the PLB office.
Okay, thank you. Questions for the board? For the executive, I guess you're the executive director for the board, yeah.
Correct.
Questions? All right, thank you, Ms. Cortez, appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
All right, further public comment? Further public comment? All right. What do you got?
Mr. Chairman, Ryan Truck has just joined. He doesn't have any comments, but he said he's available if you have any questions.
Well, I don't know that we have any questions, Mr. Schrock, but if you'd like to provide, you're actually on the board of physical therapy. So if you'd like to provide any comments, you're welcome to. Otherwise, thank you for listening in.
He's declined to.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Schrock. Further comments? Further comments? Seeing none, close public comment.
Move the bill.
Motion by Senator Scott. Discussion on the bill.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Scott.
this appears to me to be one of the standard interstate licensure compacts, and all the other ones we've been involved with that I'm aware of have worked perfectly well. I don't see any reason why this one shouldn't. And I think it will help our physical therapists if they do have occasion to leave Wyoming and go elsewhere, but I think it will be more help in terms of bringing additional therapists in, and we need them. So I'm for the bill.
Very good, thank you. Further comments, further discussion? All those, all right. Roll call on Senate File 172.
This is a roll call vote for Senate File 172. Senator Crum,
Excused?
Senator Hutchings, Senator Scott,
Aye.
Senator Steinmetz,
Excused?
Chairman Barlow.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that is 3 aye and 2 excused.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Boner. All right, any further business for the committee? So we have 2 bills before us, as I mentioned earlier. I'm still working with the 2 sponsors of those bills to figure out what order they want them in, but we'll have probably one on Wednesday and one on Friday. Did you get the amendments? Do you feel good about the amendments, Clayton? If there's any questions, holler, and we'll try to sort it out. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.